Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Most of the time, your prospect is somebody else's client or customer. You may have a better product or service. You may even have a better price. However, it's going to take more than that to convince your prospect to be your next sale. If you want to change minds, hearts, and souls, listen up as Bill and I discuss Unseating the Incumbent and other fascinating topics on episode 598 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
I don't think we consider enough this idea, Scott, that somebody is already buying what we're trying to sell.
Yeah.
You know?
They're easier sales. They're the
right.
easiest sales too. Because when I sold advertising, it was easier for me to sell advertising to people who advertised.
Right. If somebody, you don't have to convince them that what you do is good.
Mm-hmm.
You've already gotten past step one. So we're going to look at step two. People are already using what you sell. They just got to be convinced that you're going to do it better.
Yeah. And I've got some ideas and different approaches. And
well, you better, because we're going to talk about it for a while.
I know. So I'm looking.
I have nothing to talk about, but let's see where this goes.
Yeah. Hey, you know, hope you enjoy your stay.
Our audience might be surprised to find out that we do actually make some notes before we do this, rather than just kind of going thinking it off the top of our head. You're better off the top of your head than I am.
I don't know. I make it up.
Let's talk about our book club, and that is The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann. We're on chapters 5, 6, and 7. So I'll tell a little bit of the story because it's told in story form. Our hero, Joe, he's set for his second meeting, and this time he's supposed to meet with the CEO. That's in quotes. And it's at the company called Learning Systems for Children. He gets there. The receptionist leads him to a strange conference room where adults are laughing and talking and playing with finger paints, construction paper, Lego, modeling clay. He says it looks more like a kindergarten classroom than a corporate meeting. And the receptionist apologizes for taking him to the wrong room. I think that's a lie. Then she led him to another meeting room that was decked out with the same type of material, but no one was in there. Soon a young woman walks in. Her name is Nicole, and she tells him that Pindar, our guide through this, right, is running late, and they discuss the room, and she says she designed it. And what it's designed to do is help have meetings that don't get stuck in old thinking. And Joe finds out that the first group he saw was the marketing team preparing for a new release. So when Pinder comes in, he asks Joe how he likes meeting the bona fide genius. Well, that's Nicole. She's the CEO. And what Nicole introduces to Joe is the second law of stratospheric success, the law of compensation. And that means your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So I want to finish the story, then we'll talk about this law.
Yeah.
So she discusses how the software companies is able to help many more children than she could have impacted as an elementary school teacher. So it's important to provide value, law number 1, but also have impact, law number 2. Now he drops off Pindar, and Rachel gives him a freshly ground pound of her famous coffee. This famous coffee theme is going to run throughout, so be ready to hear whenever you hear about coffee, it's Rachel's famous coffee. I don't want to say that all the time. Yeah. On his drive back to the office, he thinks about his conversation with Nicole and how is he going to implement law number 2, your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So what he decides to do is make the coffee that Rachel gives him and deliver a cup to all the other people working in his office. And most of them look at him like he's crazy because Joe has never done anything for anyone else in the office because he's a go-getter. Right. And Gus is one of his office mates, kind of. Gus, I don't know if we introduced Gus last time, but he's a person that does very well. And Joe doesn't understand why Gus does well because it doesn't look like he ever works. So Gus is waiting for him when he gets done. And Gus reviews the 2 ways that Joe implemented the first 2 laws of stratospheric success. And then he asks him how he felt delivering the coffee to all his coworkers. Joe says he felt kind of stupid. And Gus says, and I think this was in italics, so it's going to be important.
Right.
Sometimes you feel foolish, even look foolish, but you do the thing anyway. And then the next day he goes to Pindar's to pick him up. And this is going to be for his third one. We're not there yet. And he has a conversation with Rachel about Pindar and how much he gets accomplished. And then on his drive with Pindar reveals Rachel's background and how she relishes the opportunity to survive, save, and serve. And these are the three universal reasons for working. And those are in italics too. So those are going to come back. So a couple things we need to remember. Law number 2, your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. And Gus saying, sometimes you feel foolish, even look foolish, but you do the thing anyway, the right thing, I would assume. And then what does it mean to survive, save, and serve? Those are three big ideas in this chapter, these three chapters.
Yeah, beautiful examples and painting that picture in the reader's mind as to how these things can be applied, and that's part of the condition is that you have to apply it, and the authors do a really good job. I've known of this book for many years. I've never read it because
Right.
I read the top or the title. I go, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So it wasn't like there was a problem. But as I'm getting into this book, it's confirming and affirming my position, my beliefs. So if you haven't picked up the book and you're just kind of following along, fine. But it's really a great reinforcement for those of you that are following along in the podcast but don't have the book. So
Well,
really
I think it's easy. I think
that.
it's easy to become selfish. We are by
Mm.
nature drawn to doing things that benefit us,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't always recognize how helping other people can be beneficial to us. And I've always thought that helping others, if the only thing we get is a good feeling, that's great. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the world, that kismet, that whatever it is you call it, I think there's always a payback in the long term for what you give and what you get.
In the story they talk about this group of people that are making up stories. They make up stories, and Joe is just kind of surprised by that. And then it's confirmed that Nicole says, you just make it up. You make it up as you go, but that's an attitude and that's an outlook and that's a mindset that you go out and you look for opportunities to be able to add value. And the more people you serve, and this is in the book, the more value you get, and that's the law of compensation. So really think about how you can serve other people and look for opportunities to give something that they would find valuable or that they need. And
And I think we would think in general, well, now Joe needs to find a way to serve his customers, not the other people in his office, right? What good does it do to serve the other people in his office? Maybe we'll
Mhm.
find out later what that has to do with anything. But it seems Joe's doing small things with these intentions, but he's not really going back to his customers. I guess he did in the first one, but he's
Mhm.
not in this one. He just, gives coffee to the other people in the office. But it's the beginning of an attitude change.
Mhm. And I've noticed with people like Joe who are somewhat, I'll just say self-centered, because I think selfishness is also pleasurable when you're giving something or doing something for another person. That's selfish because you get a reward for that. You feel good about yourself, and that's what selfishness is. But I will say that Joe is more self-centered, and I think about people that are self-centered and what they keep track of. They're keeping score of what? Of what are you keeping score? So that's the question that I ask our listeners is when you think about going out and taking on all of the adversity of every single day, what are you keeping score of? Are you keeping score of how many opportunities you're working with somebody else or aiding them? Or if they want for help, you give them help. But how often are you doing that? And what are you keeping score of?
Yeah,
And
and
now we're getting Joe getting into keeping score of how many people am I sharing my messages with? That's keeping score. Great. Go out intentionally, keep score of that.
well, and I don't think I think the mistake is to think that wherever I interject myself is exactly where the benefit is going to come. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it works that way. I think
Right.
I call it stirring the pot. You
Mm-hmm.
go out and you talk to people and you help people and you provide service and you have conversations. And then all of a sudden, from way over someplace you never knew, you got a phone call and you can't directly hook it to anything that you ever did, but it came from all those things that you did. You just don't know how you don't know what three separations or whatever
Mm.
it
Six
is,
degrees of
6
separation. Yeah.
degrees of separate. You don't know where that came from, but it came
Right.
from the fact that you're out making the world happen. You are out making activities happen. And when you do that, good things, if you do good activities,
Mm-hmm.
I think good things come from it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're out
Mm-hmm.
there doing evil activities, I think evil will come from it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just depends on where your mindset is. And as you say, you can't go out there and say, okay, now I delivered coffee to everybody. What are they going to do for me?
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's not,
Right.
if that's your attitude, you're going to fail very quickly because the return won't come directly from what you did.
Wow. And that's, I mean, there are some training companies that say, never do anything for anybody else unless you're getting something in return. Always get an IOU. Every time I do something, I get an IOU. So I'm keeping track of favors. Was watching Yellowstone, love Yellowstone. I remember one of the lines is that, threats are what favors used to be. And that was John Dutton said that. And it was like, wow, that is so true. Threats are what favors used to be. And when we're keeping track of stuff in an IOU, I would rather not keep track of some stuff like that and have a reputation of authenticity and generosity. And all of a sudden, you can't even keep track of how many. I've talked to people and I go, well, how did you guys meet? And they go, well, I don't remember. I go, I introduced you. You guys don't remember that? Now I kept track of that just because I was
Well,
so
that's because
proud
you
of that
want
relation.
credit for it.
I was just how strong that relationship became, and I put the two of them together intentionally, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I remember that." So that's the giving attitude. So just really, really loving this book, Bill. Thanks for suggesting it.
All right, so I'm just going to rephrase the second law of stratospheric success, law of compensation. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So we'll move on to chapters 8 and 9 next week.
Yeah, yeah, great. Our topic today is unseating the incumbent, and we're getting into political season, so that's why this topic kind of really resonated with me. But often, I think in most cases, we are selling something to somebody who is already buying it from somebody else. And this mindset of unseating the incumbent also works with retaining your clients. So when you think about different strategies or techniques or sales skills that you need to have to take business away from somebody else, or in the words of Anthony Iannarino, eat their lunch. Great book. I've read that work with a client. Really, really good book. Um, we can work on unseating the incumbent and growing our business. So if we look at the marketplace today, how are we going to be able to increase revenue? We're going to increase revenue by getting more clients, increasing our market share, raising our prices, or decreasing our expenses, which is only going to increase net profit, not generate more revenue in most cases. So think about strategies and goals for 2024 is I want to take more business away from other companies and increase our market share in the sandbox that we play in. So, like I said, it starts with a mindset, and people have to believe that they deserve a better life, better results, and they deserve a better outcome. But if they don't believe that they deserve better results, they will not change. And I think when it comes to unseating an incumbent, you have to start with presenting options. The question is that, we work with a prospect and we say, we offer to review and audit your current so-and-so, whatever that is, and ask them, how long has it been since you really reviewed or audited your current provider in this particular service? Because that shows a relevancy that maybe the solution hasn't changed as the demand or the market has changed. Anything you want to add as we start talking about this bill that we should cover?
Well, I liked your thought about think about it with your own clients too.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is out there trying to steal your client right now, especially your best client, your biggest client. They're out there trying to steal that client right now. They're telling them they need another provider. They're telling them they need to review what's going on. And so many salespeople who are getting money, getting revenue, getting income off of that customer have left them to the service department
Right,
and they
right.
don't
So
see
true.
them anymore and they've quit giving them their own personal service and they've made that customer available to the competition. So I
Mm.
want to make sure we think about it from both sides. One,
Right.
how do we take someone else's customer? But two, how do we protect our own clients?
Right. Oh, you just bring up such a good point. Is there's sales, which is acquisition, and there's customer service, which is retention. Acquisition that looks at long-term profitability within a client from the revenue that you as a salesperson you generate, and when it gets turned over to customer service, then it becomes how can we make this relationship more efficient? versus more effective? How can we make this more profitable for us and offer less of an experience and less customer service so that we can make more profit on our existing customers and not really think about retaining them? When all of a sudden you start losing somebody, and then all of a sudden, how much money do you spend on retaining somebody? How many times do you cut the price to win the business? There's a famous telecom company that every time you want to cancel with them, all of a sudden you come up with a better price, and they
Yep.
have a reputation of doing that.
Yep.
And it's almost like you have to threaten them in order to get a better price. Starting a conversation with how do you unseat an incumbent with your prospect is, we audit and review this current, when was the last time you did that? Oh, you never did it. Oh, do you want to talk about right now your current system and how it compares to how it's changed or has not provided everything that you need right now?
Right.
And I love the negotiation technique where you create value and then you claim value. But you have to create value in order for the prospect to understand it and then claim that value. And I would like to add on to that and propose we need to create options and then claim options. And options are so important because when you present options, you're giving a prospect the control to decide what they want. What is your goal when you present three options? Your goal is that they pick one of them and they buy from you. When you present a proposal with just one option, you're giving them an ultimatum. Take it or leave it. And it's as blunt as it can be. And that's how they're looking at it because they're just saying, you're only giving me one option, take it or leave it. No, create three options for them. And then they pick which ones they love most. Have you used options in conversations, Bill, with customers, prospects?
Well, that's my favorite close is an alternative choice.
Right.
I
Yeah.
want to give them the choice on here's maybe it's some people call it the good, better, best, and usually they'll take the middle one. But I want to give them options on how we can put this project together. And when they have options, then I don't care which one they choose. All of them are a
Right.
winner for me. But if I only give them one, it's now yes or no. They only have two options, yes or no.
hmm
If I give them a couple or three options in my proposal, then they have a few options. But I've usually gone through that process before I get to the proposals phase. The proposal is just documenting what we've already agreed to, making sure that they can make some changes to it, and we move along. So I like the options and also to give them that feeling of control.
Yeah, yeah. And technique this is a negotiation technique. It's called a MESO, MESO, multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. And you're letting them pick which one they want. Simultaneous, all at the same time, mutual equivalent, which means you all have the same percentage of profit in each of the options, or there's a reward that you get that's equal in all of them. I also would like to propose having a mindset of being a market ambassador. And a market ambassador is a person that works within an area, an industry, a geographic territory. They know everything that's going on within that territory. And they're the ambassador between the solutions that are available and the needs that the prospects have. And when you come in as an ambassador, you're not coming in as biased or, you're coming in as more agnostic where it doesn't matter, but you just want to have a conversation with them. And it would be wonderful if salespeople were invited into more conversations so that they didn't become desperate and prospects would be able to have better options because somebody's looking at what's best for them. So have that mindset of a market
Well, I
ambassador.
think also, that's really what takes us from the general sales huckster, let me do as many cold calls as I can and try to get you to buy right away. I think we should spend a lot of our time becoming experts in the field, people that are seen as value providers for the marketplace, so that when the question comes up, let's talk to Scott because he knows a lot about sales because he's talked
Mm.
to a lot of people and he's good at it. Let's talk to him. And that's what it really changes us from that hat in hand. Can I sell you something? Let's look at my catalog type of
Mm.
salesperson.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to go through a couple of techniques because first we want to start with how do we start the conversation, and now we're going to get into different techniques. I love this technique. It's called channel flipping. And it's when you ever get home and you grab the remote control and you turn on the TV and you're just going through all the different channels. Not as often now as we did 10 years ago because we've got all these streaming apps, etc. But this is a technique when you call up a prospect and say, I recognize or you shared with me before that you're using this company or going through them. And, do you ever get home and kind of want to see what else is on? What other content is on different channels. Meeting with me is talking about different options that are available in the marketplace, kind of like changing the channel and just seeing what else is there. You can always go back to your program that you wanted to watch, but you at least know what other options are available, because it's probably possible that the current service provider is not offering you things that you may need because they're not going to tell you about stuff they don't offer. And it's possible that we may have something that you may like that might be a better fit and worth considering. That's where change starts, is you have to start with consideration. So when you ask somebody to consider something, you're asking them to look at other options and to be able to be open to different solutions that are going to give them even better or more value. So that's one technique. Bill, you probably heard of the temperature close. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current service provider?
Mm-hmm.
10 being high. Okay, so you ask that question and they come back and they go, oh, probably about I don't know, a 7. Okay, well, 7's pretty high. Why so high? What do you love about them? What do you like most about working with them? Ask that first question. And then second is, what do you wish that they did that they don't offer? And, you took 3 points off. Where did they lose points? And now you're getting into an intellectual debate where people start to evaluate. And now when they start to evaluate it, they think about other options that may be available and how those other options are going to affect them personally. And all of a sudden they start getting really excited when they start identifying the formula. So that's all it is the formula.
Well, I can't emphasize how important it is to use questions to have this happen. So often we want to roar in there knowing the weaknesses of their current provider and start telling them all the things that they should want from their current provider. And what's the saying? A person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still.
Yes, exactly.
Meaning you can't make them change. They need to come to the realization, why didn't I give them a 10?
Mm-hmm,
What
mm-hmm.
is it that's aggravating me? And then if they tell you that, then you have something to play with. So ask questions, and I think it's also important, as you stated, ask what they like about it first, and then slide into what could they do better, not what do you hate about them.
Right, right. Let them brag about their decision to buy from that company. Truly, let them do a little, grandiose uh, excitement about what choice they made back when they did. And then it gets to the other part. You took 3 points off. What's
Right.
changed? And now they recognize that maybe there might be other options because they're comparing their imagination and expectations, and they're comparing it to their existing provider. Obviously, there's some disappointment in taking 3 points off. Another technique is the criteria. So, what was the criteria when you purchased or made the decision to go with that particular service or that company? And then, if you had a chance to evaluate it now, what would your criteria be now today?
Right. Would it be
This
the
is that
same? Yep.
Yeah, it may be the same, it may be different. There's a lot of changes in technology and different ways that technology affects and impacts other means and other processes within an organization. The criteria may be different. Now you're identifying kind of a mismatch: is this the perfect solution or not? Um, and then the next question to ask, very similar to that, is what has changed since you last purchased this particular service or program or this product? What's changed within the business? Is it grown? Is the business contracted? Are there more people? Are there different services? Has one replaced something else? So now that's changed since the last time that they purchased something. And then I'll close with one last technique, and that is to stay in touch with what's going on in the news.
Right.
Finding out about your competitors that have a larger market share than you do, because you always want to grow your market share. And the only way that you can do that is to take it away from people that are higher up on the ladder. But be aware of mergers. And everybody's been through a merger, and they're not always as smooth as they'd like. There may have been an ownership change that's going to affect a service that the incumbent is offering that you're trying to unseat. There may be a lawsuit. You can search lawsuits and find out what's been issued or served and what disputes they're having. Find out if the incumbent's sales have decreased. If they've decreased, they're obviously losing customers. They're not delivering the service that everybody's expecting for them. Companies have layoffs. So did the incumbent lay people off? So they're starting to decrease their employees, which means they're not going to be able to offer as much attention to their existing customers. And then lastly, every time private equity gets involved, It's like,
It's a mess.
they're so
What are we
focused
going
on
to destroy right
profitability.
now?
Profitability,
Private equity. Let's destroy this
profitability. I want a
company.
5 times or 10 times
I
return
want my
in
return.
2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And that affects everybody. I
One
guess we're
thing I
not
want to
going
add to that, Scott, is I think there's three groups that you need to do kind of some news feed on.
Mm-hmm.
One is your 5 to 10 top current clients, and
Yeah.
make sure you keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening at their company so you can intervene if something happens. I've lost more business to mergers and
Yeah.
buyouts than anything else. Um, I think you need to, if you have, and I advise people have a top 10 list of companies they want to do business with. Those should be on your news feed so you know what's happening, because those are opportunities to go in and take business away. And then your 3 or 4 main competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So your 10 top current customers, your 10 companies you want to do business with, and your main competitors. Those are the ones you should be news feeding and looking at. You can only do so many of these.
Yeah, well, Google Alerts is a great system to set up, and every time somebody ends up hitting the news, boom, you get an alert. So you don't even have to do anything proactively; it just shows up
Excellent.
reactively.
Super.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff in unseating the incumbent. Again, we need to be able to grow our revenue over the next year, and we have to figure out where is it going to come from.
So one thing I want to mention, Scott, before we wrap this up, is there's some barriers to changing vendors. There's some reasons why companies don't want to change vendors, and it's usually personal reasons rather than they're not doing a good job. One, they don't like to do the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with companies. They say we only have 3 vendors in this area because accounts payable doesn't want to have any more vendors than that. So you didn't make the cut, and you're not going to be one of our vendors because we don't want to do more paperwork. The number 2, somebody higher up made the initial buying decision. So Charlie is now in the buyer's seat, but his boss, Mary, she made the decision 5 years ago to go with this company, and it's politically unmotivated to make the change and renege on what Mary did and all the friends she has at your current company. I'm afraid I might make a bad decision. This company isn't doing a really great job, but if I buy somebody different and it doesn't go well, I'm fired. So I'd rather deal with the devil we know than the devil we don't know, right? We already know what they're bad at.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is just inertia. There's people in business out there, you may have met them, they don't want to do any work at all. So to make a new decision for a new vendor, no matter how much it'll save and how much better it will do for the company, man, I just gonna sit here with my cup of coffee and my jammies, and I'm doing fine as it is. So be careful of those things that could cause people to not move, and make sure you understand the emotional impact to getting a new vendor.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, great ways of looking at unseating the incumbent. If this is something that you'd like to do, you, our listeners, would like to do better at or learn more about, reach out to Bill or I. We'd be happy to have a conversation. Every successful sale that I ever made began with a conversation. And Bill and I welcome your calls, your emails, and different ways that we can have a conversation about how to apply what we've talked about today.
We sure would. All right, let's wrap it up with our golden nugget. This is from Charles Schultz, a good Minnesota native. Life is like a 10-speed bike. Most of us have gears we never use.
Kind
And
of
now
like
they're 18 gear and 21 gear.
21 gears.
That's right.
And electric bikes that you don't even have gears.
Yeah, you just sit on them and you claim to be exercising.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy. All right. Yeah, use some gears. Find some things you're not doing and use some of those gears you've never used.
So everything we talked about is at winningatselling.com. This is episode 598.
Next week, our book club, The Go Giver, chapters 8 and 9. That will be the law of stratospheric success number 3. And then our topic is maintaining your profit margin. So kind of a companion, I think, to what you just talked about, Scott. Please subscribe, share this podcast with your colleagues and on your social media. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.